All right, welcome back. We're going to be talking insecurity in Nigeria. Like I said at the top of the show, the past week has been a very heavy one for Nigerians across the country. So much has happened, but I think Kaduna State has been at the top of the news. That doesn't mean that the Southeast and the South-South and the Southwest haven't been having their fair share of what has been a very, very trying and disturbing week with regards to security here in Nigeria. We're joined now in our Abuja studios by two guests who will be helping us dissect this. Retired Captain Bish Johnson, who's a security expert, and Murtala Abdullahi, who's a journalist. Thanks a lot for joining us. Let me start with you, Captain Johnson. The issue of Kaduna has been quite talked about, but we still don't seem to have answers. We still have people missing. There's a lot of talk, even from the Minister of Transport, who talked about how this could have been prevented. You know, it almost looks like every time we have an incident like this, there's always a talk of should have, would have, could have. Why are we 7 years after this administration promised to put security at the top of its agenda, still talking about what could have been with regards to keeping Nigerians safe?
Thank you, Ebuka, for having me. Look, these type of things happen. They are not unique to Nigeria. They are not peculiar to Nigeria. You know, in 2004, there was Madrid's train station bombing. In 2005, similar thing happened in the UK. But the difference between all those places and us is that, look, something happens, they learn lessons from it, and they look for answers and remedies for those problems. You know, we saw with the kidnapping of Chibok girls, one would have thought that after that kidnap, we would have learned great lessons and tried to put measures in place to prevent similar occurrences of such incidents. But that didn't happen. We saw kidnap of several other schoolgirls. So that is the problem in Nigeria. It seems to be a culture that we have to allow things to happen and deteriorate to that level of where we lose lives, impact our economy before we can take action. It's not that these things don't happen. The thing is that when they happen in other places, they take actions to fix them. But if it happens here, we do nothing. Or we prolong, you know, the necessary steps that we are supposed to take to remedy those situations. Train system, land transportation system, they are always very vulnerable. They're vulnerable because they're extensive and people always have access to them. They are made in such a way that people can always have access to them. And like I said, they're extensive, and because of that, they are very vulnerable to the terrorist attacks like the one we saw in Kaduna State. And so they're always very vulnerable. And because they're vulnerable and they're that massive, they cost a lot of resources to be able to remedy. But look, no amount of money should be too big for us to secure the lives of our citizens, protect our investments. Because what has happened now with this train incident in Kaduna State is that it has put the success of that investment and our ability to recoup, to get the returns of our investment in jeopardy. Because now people will be scared to take train, and because they're scared to take train, it will be affecting the revenue that is supposed to be coming to the federal government. And because the revenue is affected, the economy is affected. That's why we should have taken every measure, no matter what it takes, to put in all the safety measures in place to prevent something like that from happening because of the consequences of incidences like that, what it has, the impact it will have on our citizens, the impact it will have on our economy, and the impact it will have in the country generally. Kaduna State, there are only 3 ways you can travel to Kaduna State. You go by air, or you go by road, or you go by train. Train before now seemed to be the safest because going by road is very difficult. And because of the short distance between Abuja and Kaduna, you know, is not very, always very feasible for people to fly. So, and that one that has been safe is the one that has experienced this attack now. So how do you travel from Abuja to Kaduna? It becomes a big question. That is why the country must spare no resources to remedy the situation, put all the safety measures in place. The technologies are there. We are not going to reinvent the wheel. All we have to do is to look at what other people have done and copy those things and put them in place, and we'll be able to secure the system.
Let me come to you now, Murtala, because I mean, you're a journalist. I want to believe you have a picture of how things have been going with regards to this particular part of our lives. It seems like every government in the last couple of years, at least, that has been in power, seems to talk about how security or insecurity in Nigeria is politicized. You know, whether it's the PDP or the APC, we tend to hear them say our enemies are trying to fester this. Election season is around the corner. They want us out the way. It almost seems like they try to tie, you know, these things with politics. We also hear sometimes they say, oh, we know the people behind these things. Why are these issues still festering? Why are we still at a point where politics, if security is so politicized, does it mean the politicians are guilty? What's your take on all of this? It's really just disheartening that people die and we talk about politics with it.
Thank you, Buka, for having me. In fact, when you said disheartening, that's what describes the situation that we are. There's little value for human life, and it's entirely within the political system. You can see the conversation that has been happening after the March 28 attack on the Kaduna train. There is little or no updates from the government. The perpetrators have not been identified or made public by the government. There is no crisis room in place to support families. There is no crisis room for transparency and accountability. The Nigerian public have been left in darkness. This shows how we value human life in Nigeria. There is still no number on the actual number of people adopted. So it's really, really sad. So when we look at what happened in Kaduna, it's a microcosm of an entire issue around insecurity in Nigeria. So first, it shows lapses within the security architecture of this country, lapses within intelligence cycle. Why did this incident happen? Why was it not prevented? Why was it not disrupted at the point that it was being implemented? Because there will have been a lot of mobilization of logistics and support equipment to conduct that attack. Why they did not raise the dust and security forces get to intervene? Probably somewhere, someone within the system charged with the job to detect this kind of threat actually did, but because of certain issues within the system, that has not been, the follow-up action did not take place. And it also shows the fact that we never learn, we refuse to learn, even when we have very, very disheartening lessons. In October 2021, there was an incident on the same track that should have led to really reforms and also setting in place mechanisms to prevent it from happening. And one of those mechanisms was actually deterrence. The state actors did not put in place sufficient deterrence to prevent the incident from happening. And that's why the terrorists responsible for the attack had the opportunity to carry out a more bolder, a more deadly attack because there was no deterrence. And then thirdly, we have failed to tackle the complex crisis in the Northwest. There's been knee-jerk reaction. Today we are sending troops, we are conducting airstrikes, we want to bomb them out, but we are not addressing the stressors of the problem, neither are we going after the actors, that's the perpetrators of these heinous crimes. When the government designated them as terror groups, there's virtually no names. It was just a blanket designation of as terror groups, but there's actually no names of the perpetrators, their areas of operations, and their modus of operandi. That way, we know that Mr. ABC are terrorists because of the actions they have taken in the Northwest. Secondly, there is a disorganized and lack of unified response to the crisis in the Northwest. One state is doing this, the other state is doing that. The federal government is just there taking a passive stance, and all they want to do is to conduct airstrikes and think the solution will be solved. We have seen the crisis mutated over years. It wasn't this violent and deadly some few years back. There's a reason why it's mutating. There's a reason why it's becoming deadly. Across the world, when 9/11 happened in the US, it led to a lot of reforms, especially in terms of how the intelligence community worked there, in terms of also homeland security. But over here, we have a lot of incidents that should have led to institutional reforms, strengthening of the security system, addressing of both stressors of that are fueling conflict, but that does not happen. We hope that it will happen now after the Kaduna train incident. We should not just, there's been a lot of conversation about deploy technology. Technology is not a magic tool. It has to be part of a holistic, unified, surgical approach to solving the crisis.
You know, a lot of what you said there is really just hitting the nail on the head. And I want to come to you now, Captain Johnson, because, I mean, you're a security expert. Maybe you can help us understand this. Like Mursala said there, we have had these incidents go on for years now. We still don't seem to have a face or a name or anything. We've never even really had anyone arrested to say that, okay, these are the people who are perpetrating this. Is this an indictment on our security agencies? How complex is this issue? That, like I said, 7 years into this administration, we still don't seem to have a face of what we used to call bandits who have now become terrorists, who are perpetrating all of this, and we don't even know who they are. How is that possible?
Well, it's possible because I have to agree with the things that my brother here is saying. Look, what is happening in Nigeria is that most things that we do in this country is politicized. And security is one of those things that is equally politicized, like everything else is politicized. There is a religious part of it. You have ethnicity involved. And so nobody is actually doing things for the national interest without looking at, you know, what tribe they come from, what political party they belong, and how do they win the next election. And so when you address national issues based on those bases, you're not going to get it right. You saw the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, same day he was heaping praises on this administration, that look, that the security situation in the country now is better than what it was in 2015. It was the same day that we have this train attack. So politicians want to win election. Because they want to win election, instead of doing the right thing, they will do the things that help them to win the election. But after you win the election, what next? You win the election to serve the people. And part of serving the people is to protect their lives and their property, which, by the way, is the basic function of government. Look, the problem is complicated. I'm not going to put all the problems on the current administration because even the previous administrations and the ones before them failed to take the necessary step that they were supposed to take. Nations are not built overnight. Nations are built gradually, one after the other. You come, you play your role. The next person comes, they build upon the one that you did, and it continues like that. So, but because we failed to do what we were supposed to do in the yesteryears, we created a massive gap. And so those gaps, we take very radical measures to be able to close them. And one of those gaps is in terms of our security architecture. The number of policemen we have in the streets, the kind of training that they get, you know, their funding, how much of that funding actually gets down to them. Corruption equally plays a part in what we are witnessing now, because even when you appropriate funds for certain things to be done in this country, those funds don't make it to where they're supposed to make it. And so the things that is supposed to be done, we don't get it done. If you look at, we are calling for reforms. Now, if we agree to reform, the reform is going to cost money, right? And if the people who are supposed to carry out those reforms, funds are appropriated, and instead of using those funds to do those reforms, they pocket them, the reforms are not going to be adequately done. So they will be done haphazardly, and then those lapses and those gaps that allow these terrorists to take advantage of the vulnerabilities will still be taking place. So the solution to our problem is very, very holistic. We have to look at all of everything, including, but not limited to restructuring. Restructuring almost every aspect of our life, because all these things are interwoven and interconnected. Okay. So you cannot solve one problem in isolation of the other. You have to look at all these things holistically by taking the issue of corruption seriously, looking at how we reform and rejig our security architecture, because we need more boots on the ground. Okay. If you go to other places, even the Kaduna State government and the FCT could have been able to build a network of security that would have been tight enough to prevent such an attack on a rail system that emanated from Abuja to Kaduna. But there is no such thing as state police. Our governors answer, you know, chief security officers of their states, but in reality, they don't have control over any of the security architecture. They will have to, you know, work with the federal security architecture to be able to actually carry out the functions that they're supposed to carry out.
Sorry, thank you very much. Let me quickly go to Morsala before we go now, because I just want to find out, we live in a country where, you know, copycats copycatism is almost like our reality. We see how Boko Haram festered. You know, it starts with one attack, people see that it works, and it becomes a thing. You know, there's a lot of worries now about what this can become across the country. Also, we know how election season sadly is across the country, and how violence seems to start picking up once, you know, campaigns start getting heated. We saw Anambra State, for example, in the lead up to the elections, how pretty deadly it was until the election day with the governorship. How worried should Nigerians be? You know, there's already a lot of apathy with regards to coming out to vote. Is this a trend that we should be worried about, you think?
Should be worried, and this should really lead to institutional changes to strengthen the security forces. Copycat is a huge problem, especially it's one of the main reasons why kidnapping for ransom has become an epidemic across Nigeria, and especially in the Northwest. Until the state is able to form sufficient deterrence, punish perpetrators of crime, and also what we really need to know is the fact that what we are seeing in the Northwest, it's a pipeline, it's a product of several factors, and we need to address the underlying drivers. Why are actors behaving the way they are? That has to be solved, either in terms of social injustice, poor law enforcement capacity in rural communities, lack of local governance, and then we also need to punish people for the crime. So it's a combination of justice, social justice, and the criminal justice system, law enforcement reform, governance, everything, as he earlier stated. It's a needed problem, and we need to solve all the several components.
How do we do that, though?
It has to start with the political will to reform the system, political will to strengthen local governance, especially, for me, I feel local government is a matter of national security. Allowing local governments to be strong, to be able to meet the needs of the people. When we do that, there will be a lot of reduction in terms of vulnerability and drivers for conflict and crisis across Nigeria. Secondly, we need to strengthen the criminal justice system. So there's a lot of conversation about why is it that we don't see bandits getting, or the so-called bandits getting sanctioned in court. The part of the problem is the lack of evidence. So you need to also have a strong law enforcement capabilities to gather evidence, sufficient evidence that when you get to court, the judge has no other option but to prosecute someone for the offense he has committed. People get to manage kidnapping individually as a family. There is no lead agency, there is no lead framework that ensures that the state knows who are perpetrators of kidnapping, so that when they get arrested, they can be prosecuted. So there has to be reforms, really. We need governance reform. And instead of state policing, I think that one area that the policing is an architecture in itself and does not lie with the police alone. So when you provide social governance, it's a form of reducing vulnerability that leads to security crisis in the future.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I know a lot of us are very worried. A lot of Nigerians have been asking questions. Where does this leave us, you know, with regards to 2023 and the elections? One thing that should be paramount in our minds, though, is that security should be a huge talking point with regards to whoever we decide to vote for, whoever is campaigning for votes, because it literally is at the crux of the matter, as we can see it now. I mean, the paramount duty of government is to secure lives and keep us safe, and it's looking like things are slipping away, unfortunately. But thank you very much for joining us from Abuja Studios. We'll take a break now and come back. Please stay with us.